Welcome to the Bare Naked Show. I am Dr. Simmons, a humanitarian, a psychologist, and an entrepreneur. And my co-partner is...
Hello, everyone. I am Jay Hurst, TV radio personality, as well as an entrepreneur. So good to have you all joining us again here on the Bare Naked Show.
Yes, it's an exciting time. It's been a little while since we saw you all, but we're so excited to be back with you. And we're hoping that you share the same level of excitement to be with us as well. The last time we were together, we did Caught in the Middle, where we were talking about the challenges of being born in Africa, raised in America, and really trying to find our identities. And ultimately, you know, the kinds of stressors that come along with that. So we had some fun, but we tapped into some real situations that we faced. And just because of the temperature of the times, we decided to put Caught in the Middle on hold for a little bit. But what we're going to do today is we're going to check in on ourselves. So what I'll do is, have my partner Jay tell you a little bit about, just lay the foundation for this particular episode, and then we'll take it from there.
Sounds good, Doc. So as you said, we're definitely checking in with ourselves. This has been 2020 has been a year that I'm sure can have many, many descriptions. And a lot of times with the things that we've been facing, there are, there's political tensions, there are racial tensions, there is a pandemic still happening. So many transitions kind of simultaneously. We want to make sure, being that the Bare Naked Show is a show that helps you to identify soul traumas, that we really just check in with ourselves to make sure that we are identifying those things that could be causing us some trauma, but also to not just identify them, but to leave you with some things, some tips and some pointers that'll help you to really just push through and give you a way for you to cope with that. So that being said, we're going to talk about the current events. We're going to talk about Kamala Harris. We're going to talk about mental health. So we're really, it's going to be a really, I'm going to say juicy, because there's so many things that are juicy, but this is actually also going to give us a gateway and a segue into what our next series is going to lay the foundation, I guess, or kind of go into. So as Doc said, we will definitely conclude Caught in the Middle. We have another great show for you. And then after that, we're going to go into our next series is going to look at some things, especially in the African-American communities and people of color, the things that we are facing, how certain things affect us disproportionately. So without any further delay, Doc, I'm going to go ahead and kind of jump right in to one of our topics that we want to discuss this evening, which is Black women. And I call it the Black woman trauma because that's how it feels like for me personally. Senator Kamala Harris, she's running. For those who do not know who she is the running mate for vice president with Joe Biden, who is the Democratic candidate for presidential, or the Democratic presidential candidate. After her debate, and there's only been one debate, I read an article. There were a lot of things, a lot of comments, a lot of feedback, so many things that happened. There were the Twitter memes all over social media, different memes about her faces. I saw one that had like the different faces and characters. No, it was put out as a joke. I felt the reality of that because it seems that as a woman of color, you can't be too strong. You can't be too aggressive. You have to, and I say that for myself, watch what you say, how you say it, not to come across, too harsh or abrasive. Doc, can you relate to that?
There's a constant monitoring. There's like an internal dialogue taking place where you're monitoring your facial expression, your body language, your tone of voice. And, all of those things can be overwhelming. It's hard to focus on what it is that you're trying to communicate when you also have to simultaneously be regulating yourself and how you're coming off so as to not be judged, stereotyped in some way or the other. So I can definitely relate to what you're saying, Jay.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you said that, laid that out, being judged or being stereotyped. And the article that I'm referring to was in New York Times. I want to say the date of the article was back in October, shortly after the debate. It was October 9th that it was published. The headline, which is what really stuck out for me, was Kamala Harris in the double bind of racism and sexism, which I thought, wow, the double bind, and the reason I bring that out is because, again, talking about soul traumas, I think sometimes we're so accustomed to that's just the way it is. That's how we have to flow. We don't recognize that this is still something that is traumatic. And you're functioning, if you will, in a sense of a certain level of trauma. It's become like your norm.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And just to remind, our audience, we keep mentioning the trauma, but remember, if you've been with us and if you haven't been with us, just a reminder, when we talk about soul trauma, right, we're talking about those negative experiences that impacts every aspect of who you are, mentally, physically, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, just all of you, the things that we go through. And we're talking about Black women in particular, the things that we go through, that the weight that we carry, that we're constantly trying to sift through and breathe through without being suffocated by it. So I just want to kind of lay the foundation for where you're going. And I'm really enjoying this piece on Kamala Harris and Black women in particular.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for touching on that. Absolutely, with as far as soul trauma. But I just wanted to highlight that these are some of the things that I think we go through, and it becomes like a flow, if you will. And it even talking about Senator Harris pulls out, and as Doc said, we're speaking specifically about Black women. Women, I believe, as a whole, our gender, if you will, we deal with so much sexism. We know that there are the gender equalities that women, have been fighting for equal rights, to have equal pay. We're doing so much work. And then it breaks down even more into a subcategory when it comes to women of color. You have to fight a little more. And I think I shared this before. For me, I'm a woman of color where, and I'm a thick, curvy woman. And sometimes I have to be mindful because someone may be intimidated. So that's one of the things I wanted to just kind of point out, to recognize and to say, I feel you, I hear you. And for those who may, be like, oh my gosh, it becomes so tiresome and it's so wearisome, we understand. And that's something, definitely to identify. And one of the things that we will do, as I said before at the end of the episode, is Doc is going to provide us with some things that will help us as we progress, and to help just get us through these particular times. So
yeah, definitely. You were talking about the memes with the different faces and everything. I won't name the channel, but I saw a particular channel that was saying, look at all the faces that Kamala's making. Oh, it's so aggressive and I can't believe it. And it's interesting enough because someone else, another show did a comparison where they parallel Kamala's faces to our current leader's face. And you can imagine who makes the worst faces of them all. And yet that's not perceived as being derogatory or mean when he does him being him. But when Kamala does it, it's her being abrasive and kind of scary and all of that. So the words, even the words that are used to describe our actions are very different from what would be used to describe that of a man, particularly that of a white man. So it's a constant battle. And again, this is another type of kind of trauma that we live with that we internalize as normal, but in reality is eating away at us and it's not normal at all.
Absolutely, that's right.
Shall we switch over to the other topic of
I think that's a good segue for us. Yes, yes.
The other issue that we had on our agenda, again, we're laying down the foundation because this right here is going to segue into our next series for sure, where we would get a little bit more in depth about each of these areas and what it means to us. All right. But the next foundational topic that we're going to cover is police brutality. Okay. Some argue that this, we are experiencing more police brutality than ever. Some say, well, I think it's more so that we have cell phones now, so these things are being caught on camera. One way or the other, we have been inundated with a lot more images of police brutality than I can recall in the last 25 years. I haven't seen this much overstimulation of attacks on Black and brown bodies. Now, if you're someone with a Black and brown body, each attack feels like a personal hit. A more recent, like this year, we've seen so many. We've seen George Floyd, we've seen Breonna Taylor. Both of those cases are devastating in so many ways, right? And we got to witness that. And I'm sure that there were more people who maybe don't look like us that were disturbed by it. But I think it hits you harder when you know that that could be my brother, my husband, my sister, my cousin. It just hits home a little bit deeper. And again, here we are internalizing that. I want to share a more recent incident that happened literally in my backyard, maybe 4 minutes away from where I live. And that was the Walter Wallace situation where this is someone he has a mental health issue. He's been in and out of hospitalizations, I would say probably having a psychotic break or probably having one of those depressive moments where he was struggling. Okay. And he had a knife, and here we have him. His mother is trying to calm him down. They call the cops in an effort to calm him down and maybe take him to the hospital. He's waving this knife around. The cops are saying, put the gun down, put the gun down. He doesn't put it down. Instead, he continues, coming towards them. And each of those cops that were called onto the scene loaded 7 rounds each into him. So 14 shots at the moment, in front of this man's mother, in front of this man's, I believe his fiance was there at the time, and just in front of the entire community. And I can't disclose certain names, but I personally know individuals that live on that block that got to witness that, and that was so disturbing to them on so many levels. And the first thing that I thought, I was trying so hard not to watch this, okay? But it came up in a number of my sessions with my patients. And I said, you know what, let me just take a look at it. And it was disturbing. It was disturbing. It amazes me how every time we see a Black or brown body that appears to be quote unquote threatening, they get shot and they get murdered and they don't get to see another day. And one of the reasons why I think that happens is because we aren't perceived as human beings. This is yet another object. And once you objectify a human being and you pull out the humanity from them, it doesn't faze you much. One of the things that were put out there was that the officers did their due diligence. They did what they were supposed to do. And I was just thinking for myself that work in a hospital where we deal with patients who have psychotic breaks,
Right.
inpatient, we don't have guns, we don't have tasers, but yet every single year we have to go through appropriate response training, which are basically different like martial arts type maneuvers to try to de-escalate someone without any killing.
Wow.
And the first thing I thought to myself is, how is it that we get trained this way? Is there not such training for the people that police our communities?
Doc, I think that
I am getting really sick and tired of seeing my brothers die like that, especially when the person is in the midst of a mental health crisis.
yes.
It's interesting how Kyle Rittenhouse, remember the white kid, 17-year-old at
People, killed 2 people and another one's injured. Yeah.
And injured another person, was walking around with his gun willy-nilly. He lived to see another day. How is it that this man who didn't shoot anyone, he didn't kill anyone, he didn't injure anyone, did not get to see another day? It's quite disturbing. And there's so much that goes into that particular story. But for me, it's one of those things that increases our level of trauma, especially if you're a person of color.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I saw what happened. I did see the filming and did some research on the story. I remember one part of the story said that his brother called for the ambulance and they sent the police instead. So that in and of itself, I don't want to, because we're going to talk more about this. I think it's necessary, but they called for the ambulance. Instead, the police were sent, and these are officers that supposedly have been trained in de-escalation. Furthermore, they had tasers that they could have done that. And as you talked about being fed up in the trauma, I am a wife, I am a mother, I am a sister, I am a daughter. And it's so concerning that this conversation continues to happen because I have a son who now is driving, and they don't see the little boy. They see 6'2". He sounds like he's somebody's grown man, and he's not. He's not. His brain is still developing. He is still a child. Yes, he's a teenager, but he is still a child. But they don't see that. And even more so, talking about Breonna, it's deeply disturbing, and I totally agree. So again, this is one of those things that I'm glad that we brought it up, especially talking about mental health, because mental health in the African American community is starting to become more and more prevalent, because now we all are, as a people, as just a collective, we have to sit still. And when you're sitting still, things are starting to surface that may not have had the time or been able to be given the attention. So now it is my hope that we will be able to build better conversations and approaches as we move forward in this 2020 into whatever the new year is going to bring. I'm trying not to be overly emotional, because that hits home. That hit home in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And just as an evidence, to the extent to which this is traumatic for a lot of us, in my practice, I have seen 3 times the increase in volume of people seeking mental health treatment. And all of it is as a result of what's going on right now, the pandemic, and, the just police brutality and the division in our society at large. And it really is devastating. So, whew.
It is, yeah, it's a lot, so these things, it's like, like you said, that side.
It weighs on you.
It does, it really does. And then, segueing into our next point, the pandemic, it's still here. It has not left, and it's not disappeared. It hasn't gone away. It's still here. And alarmingly, alarmingly, the numbers continue to increase. And that's so more disproportionately in African American communities,
Yeah. Yeah.
which, we're talking about the traumas, and again, I'm striving not to be super emotional, but this is why we're checking in with everyone. We have to check in
Yeah.
because we're dealing with a lot all
Yeah.
at one time as a people. The human race, if you will, as a nation, there's so many things that are traumatic, and as we said, we're really focusing on the African American community, more specifically. So many, it's like a multi-layered issues, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. So, they're so checking on yourself, every now and then you'll notice that as we talk, I take a deep breath in and I breathe out just because I notice my tension building up and I hold it in my chest and in my shoulder. So every now and then, Jay, when you feel yourself just like deep breath in through your nose, exhale very deeply because we don't want to hold that toxicity in our body. That's how we get things like hypertension and all of those things because we're holding our stress and there's nowhere to put it. There's nowhere to put it. So we got to let it out somehow. There's got to be an exit.
That's
Even
very
breathing in and out isn't, we're exiting, we're letting it go out of our body so it doesn't sit with us. But speaking of the pandemic, and there are just a number of factors, and we'll just highlight a few of them. Again, we'll go in depth, but a number of factors that um, is the reason why our communities tend to be more deeply affected by this pandemic. Okay. When we look at it, we look at like there's a multi system, discrimination in place. So when people say, oh, systemic racism is not a thing, it is a thing, right? So when we think about different areas in which we experience discrimination, let's take, for example, we experience discrimination in our healthcare system, right? So a number of individuals, we don't have the best healthcare that's accessible to us. And interestingly enough, when minorities do have access to healthcare, when we actually make our way, you think, oh, I've paid all this money and I've got good healthcare. When you make your way into hospitals, the treatment that you get, that's your quality of care is very different from our white counterparts. And part of it is because of implicit biases that healthcare professionals have towards minorities. For example, there's a huge research that shows that when minorities, especially women in labor, when we go in and we're saying we're in pain, guess what? The understanding is, oh, they're not in pain. They have a high pain tolerance. Isn't that interesting? What makes you think that as a Black woman, I have a much more higher pain tolerance than a white woman? So we get treated differently. If you look at the Surgeon General report about healthcare disparities, you will see all the ways in which we get discriminated against. So one area is healthcare, right? The other area is in housing. When you think about redlining, certain areas we don't have access to, right? We tend to live in more densely populated areas. And when we're dealing with the contingent, like COVID-19, right? Where it's highly contagious, when we're densely populated like that, the chances are we are at an increased risk of getting it and spreading it because we don't live apart, like in the rural areas or in suburban areas, right? So that's one area. Think about even our education. There's, again, disparities even there. Some of us aren't even educated. People still argue with me about COVID-19 starting in 2019. Something as simple as that. It's not because it was 19 for 2019, they say. I'm like, yes, it is. But I won't argue with you about that point. Where do you think it got the 19 from? Oh, it's the number 19 of the coronavirus. Like, what are you talking about? So just that lack of education is needed. I'm telling you, the things that I have to explain daily, I just be like, why am I going through this right now? So there's the piece about education, right? And even so, most of us are still thinking, oh, it's not a big deal. Just drink some tea. Oh, it's okay. We can still party, barbecue. I've seen people open up like it's all good out there, when in reality, it's not. Okay, so you started this by saying, is COVID-19 real? Absolutely. It's still
Absolutely.
around, it's still present, and we have to
Yes.
act as such.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing, and again, for the sake of time, we will get into all of those things. But again, we tend to be healthcare providers. We tend to be essential workers, which means unlike some of our counterparts that can afford to work from home, we don't have the choice of working from home, right?
Right.
So
Right.
there's so much there. And let's be mindful of that as a community of color, being mindful that, listen, we can't afford not to follow guidelines. We can't
Yes.
afford, we're already at risk because of pre-existing conditions. We can't
Right.
afford any of that. Did you
Right.
want to add anything? Because there's a lot to say here.
So much to say. Just please continue to cleanse your hands. Wear a mask. You don't have to, struggle and restrict yourself. But even gatherings as families, something personally for me, I had to miss a very, very close loved one's celebration, but I had to make sure that I was following the measures. And we, in my household, we're definitely very, very, complicit about, or, we're consistent about following guidelines, how many people were around. So we definitely need to make sure that we're sticking to the guidelines, as you said. And for the sake of time, I know we're going to come back to this in our next segment. So I'm not going to, I know you have some things you want to give us for our viewers before we sign off. So I'm going to pass everything back over to you, Doc.
No problem. It's not too many things. I'll try to cut back on some of them. The first thing I want us to talk about is when it comes to checking in ourselves, there's something we call body scan. Okay, so Jay, you and I can do this right now. Most
Okay.
of us, when we're stressed, we hold our attention in different areas of our bodies. Like I mentioned before, for me, when I'm tense, my shoulder goes up like this. I hold my tension in my shoulder. I have to remind myself to drop your shoulder, relax.
Mm.
For some of us, we hold our tension in our chest. Some people hold their tension in their back. So the first thing you can do to check in on yourself is to do a quick body scan from head to toe. Where is the tension in my body? Where is it in my neck? Is it in my back? Is it in my shoulder? Wherever you hold your tension, try to just breathe into that area and let it out. As a follow-up to body scan, once I know where my tension is, one thing I want to do is practice some really brief diaphragmatic breathing. I will go in depth with that at some point, but the quickest way to do that is slow breaths in through your nose. Count it very slowly for about 4 seconds. So like hold it for 2, exhale for another 4 seconds. When you do that a number of times, you will find that there's an increased relaxation that takes place in your body. Okay. So that's body scan number 1. Where am I holding my tension? Deep breathing. Number 2, let me breathe into that tension place and relax myself. Now, the final thing I want to leave us with is something called autogenics. Autogenics are basically self-generated phrases. It's coming from within that you say to yourself to induce a level of calm, relaxation, and to detox your stress. So Jay, for this particular segment, you will be my audience. All right. So we will put autogenics together.
Okay.
With the intention of producing calm, reducing our stress, de-stressing us. All right. So I'm going to say a few phrases and I would like you to repeat those phrases after me. Get yourself in a relaxed state and just repeat them as I say them, okay? My arms and legs are heavy.
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 My arms and legs are heavy and warm.
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 My heartbeat is calm and steady.
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 I feel supremely calm.
I feel supremely calm.
I feel supremely calm.
I feel supremely calm.
And one more time, I feel supremely calm.
I feel supremely calm. I do feel
What was
supremely
that like for
calm.
you, Jay? We have 2
That
seconds. What
was
was it
very
like?
relaxing. That was great. That was excellent. 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 Awesome.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. That actually helped me. I have something that I'm going to definitely, use and put into place. I hope, you as our audience will take advantage of these great tips that Doc has given us, tools for us to check in with ourselves. I know that some of you have commented about, things. Continue to comment. We're going to come into the comments. We'll jump in. We'll have conversations. We'll definitely, follow up. Anything else you have for us tonight, Doc?
No, that's it. Thank you for joining us. We are so happy to be back. Thank you for hanging in there with us, and it's been wonderful. We hope to see you again. Join us in the next series, our next episode of the Bare Naked Show with Dr. Simmons and
Jay Hurst. You all have a blessed evening. Bye-bye.
bye.